Hey, what's up, audience? It's Drone Thrust, and today we're going to talk about how Christopher Nolan and Donald Trump differ on how to save Hollywood. I think that the solutions that Trump and Nolan both want are kind of ridiculous. Hey, what's up, guys? We are going to talk about Christopher Nolan's latest interview. In Christopher Nolan's latest interview, he expressed something in common with Donald Trump. Personally, I think Nolan must hate Donald Trump. All of Hollywood hates Donald Trump now, and some of it is justifiable. I'm hardly a Trump promoter. I hate tariffs, flat out. I hate his betrayal of Ukraine. In terms of the ICE raids, I think they're draconian. It's like I don't believe, in deporting kids. But that being said, a lot of people who are being deported are criminals. And, a lot of the violence that's being provoked, on the streets of Minneapolis is being provoked. Don't threaten the cops and you won't get attacked. But okay, so let's talk about, Trump and Nolan. Uh, Christopher Nolan is directing his first movie since Oppenheimer. Christopher Nolan's next movie is called The Odyssey. Check out the trailer. I thought it was amazing. I'm going to take off from work to see this 4-hour masterpiece. I'm sure it's going to win Best Picture. But Christopher Nolan is angry that employment in Hollywood is going down. He is he didn't say anything about the Netflix Warner Brothers merger. I think he avoided talking about that issue, because he didn't want to get so Trump, hey, what's up, Jet Bauman? Trump didn't want to discuss. No. Christopher Nolan didn't want to discuss Oppenheimer. He didn't want to discuss the Netflix Warner Brothers merger, probably because he didn't want to go on the record about it. The Netflix Warner Brothers merger will make sure that Hollywood talent gets paid less and they'll get canceled more. Hollywood stars with a scandal won't be able to work in Hollywood once Netflix and Warner Brothers get together, I think. Hello, Blake Lively. But yes, Christopher Nolan did an interview, and he has something in common with Trump insofar as he's angry that employment in Hollywood is going down. Hollywood is not as big as it used to be, and Christopher Nolan believes that the government needs to give Hollywood tax credits. I think that's probably true. My problem with giving, I think a lot of businesses need tax credits. It's difficult for me to get to the point where I argue that we need to give, tax credits to movie stars because movie stars get paid a lot of money. I would say that instead of the government giving, Hollywood studios tax credits to film, the movie stars should take a pay cut at the top of the ladder. But ultimately, I would say that I would agree with the tax credit proposal far more than Trump's tariff proposal. Donald Trump proposed, Donald Trump thinks that tariffs solve all economic problems. And in terms of his policy towards movies I found to be interesting. He believes that all movies filmed overseas should receive 100% 100% tariff. The latest movie I saw was the dreadful Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, and what I noticed that there weren't any scenes that were filmed in America. The ships that they filmed on were indeed American ships. It was one of the ships in the movie was the George W. Bush. The film had a lot of American actors, but I did notice from the Final Reckoning, that it was mostly filmed in Europe. Um, and Donald Trump is angry about this, so he wants to impose a 100% tax on Hollywood movies that are filmed uh, abroad. It is true that foreign countries have lured production away from Hollywood. If you go to Hollywood, um, I've never been there, but supposedly the first thing that you notice when you go to Hollywood is that it is a shell of itself. If you were a seasoned, actor and you go to Hollywood now, you're good. If you, let's say you've been in it since like the 1980s, you're gonna, you supposedly you're gonna notice that there aren't as many people there as there were before. And one reason why Hollywood has experienced a decline in movie studio activity is that movie studios can set up green screens wherever they want. Canada, I think Canada especially has done a great job in luring production overseas. I think like a lot of X-Men movies are filmed in Canada. Interstellar it was filmed in Canada. I don't understand why. I mean, Christopher Nolan complains about the lack of employment in Hollywood, but he filmed Interstellar in Canada. I would ask Christopher Nolan one question. I would have for Christopher Nolan is, did you film Interstellar in Canada, as I think he did, because you were given tax credits to do a film that you easily could have filmed in Kansas. So I think that there are what Christopher Nolan is claiming about the need for Hollywood to get special tax credits is somewhat questionable and maybe even hypocritical. But I do applaud his desire to want to increase employment in Hollywood. I don't work in Hollywood. I'm not attempting to. I worked as an extra in The Dark Knight Rises. I actually worked with Christopher Nolan, and I was paid generously, and it was like the experience of my life. I had a great time on the set of The Dark Knight Rises. I didn't talk to Nolan, but I saw him walking around. I saw Bane, Batman, and all of the action scenes that were filmed on Wall Street. I saw the Batmobile, and I had a great time there. Christopher Nolan has a very intense work ethic. When I worked with Nolan on the set, he was pacing around with his iPad, checking to make sure everything was just so. He understood that he only had 2 days, 3 days to film at the stock exchange, and he looked stressed. But at the end of the day, it was a great experience. Yeah, so I wish that Christopher Nolan, would locate in Hollywood and produce a movie in LA. I would like to see Christopher Nolan's take on the California experience. But all too often, what I find with Christopher Nolan's movies is that they all take place overseas. Um, Tenet was filmed overseas, as was Inception, and the Odyssey is also obviously filmed overseas. You can't film Greece in California. If you're gonna film ancient Greece, I think you better, get as close to the Mediterranean as you can. But yes, so now Christopher Nolan is coming back with an interview wherein he says he wants to see employment increase in Hollywood. Christopher Nolan is a member of the Directors Guild of America. That I think that's a Hollywood union, and I hear that they have contract talks coming up. The big issue with the DGA is that they have to sign a five year contract, and they are in heavy they're they're involved in a thorough debate about the use of AI, like I'm doing in films. My background is not a real picture. That's a Grok AI picture, just, for your information. Christopher Nolan obviously didn't have his photo taken with Donald Trump. That's me using AI in a controversial manner. Hollywood personalities and copyright holders hate the fact that people like me use grok, deep fakes of real people, to put them in fake scenarios in order to generate content. What I'm doing is extremely controversial. I'm sure the administrators of YouTube, look at my channel and are worried. I'm becoming. I want to be known for being a controversial a commentator, and I just hope I don't get banned for using deepfakes. But I don't think I'm in violation of YouTube's terms of service, because I always make it clear that the images I'm showing aren't real. And to be fair, I'm using fair use. It's a parody what I'm doing. I mean, there are lots of people on YouTube who do parodies. You just have to be careful when you use deep fakes, that you don't, piss off the person that you're creating a deep fake of. But yes, the DGA is very worried about AI. Christopher Nolan has stated that one reason why there has been a decline in employment in Hollywood is the hype surrounding AI. Movie studios cannot rely on making money at the movie theaters anymore. It's no surprise for me to tell you guys that most of you look at movies on Netflix rather than Regal cinemas. Um, Despite the fact that there was a recent renaissance in 3D movies, nobody cares. Nobody really cared. 3D movies have been a fad that comes in and out of style every 5 years, and I'm not sure, like, you can even see that many 3D movies if you want to. I would not want to see a 3D movie because they make me dizzy and nauseous. I think the last one I saw was Gravity, but it was not like a very pleasant experience. I thought the 3D was just not something that I need to uh, i- spend, $20 on an enhanced ticket to go see. 3D TVs, I think, are out of style. Nobody really cares about them. I don't think you could see sports events in 3Ds on your television. Maybe you can. I'm not aware of a lot of tech um, technology that's out. But yeah, the Directors Guild of America is very concerned about AI. They think that I'm going to go on Grok and generate images of spaceships landing on Mars, and that is going to satiate my need for science fiction movies that get budgeted from that are produced on a high budget from big studios. And to a large extent, it is. If I go on Grok and generate an image of a spaceship landing on Mars and post it to my YouTube account, I could get, before it gets shadow banned, I think I could get, like 100 views. And I'm just a small channel. Uh, you know, there are channels who are much bigger than I am that use AI and get millions of views. And what Hollywood hates about this is that the AI companies that generate this content use Hollywood copyrighted films in order to create the images of, eh, you know, they exploit their copyrights in order to feed their models with information on how to generate images. So if I'm going to do an image of, a nuclear bomb going off in Moscow, then what it would undoubtedly, the model would borrow a lot of content from Hollywood copyrighted movies in order to generate that video. And the movie studios cannot stand the fact that companies like Grok and OpenAI feed their movies into their models in order to generate content for small time YouTubers like me. You know, the buzzword is AI slop. People don't, the movie studios are very environmentally conscious, of course. You know, if you look at who runs Hollywood, they're all environmentalists. You know, Leonardo DiCaprio and James Cameron, for example, are big environmentalists who are active in Hollywood. I am sure that they're furious that AI companies are draining the power grid in order to exploit their copyrights, you know, to make money, you know, for themselves. You know, Scarlett Johansson lashed out at AI companies recently. She stated that she was furious that the AI companies were supposedly using her art in order to enhance their models and exploiting her image in order to make money for themselves. I mean, I think that that's a legitimate concern. I mean, I just don't understand how, you know, you could stop that from happening because there's going to be a lot of small AI companies that, you know, provide, you know, people on the internet who want deep fakes with them. You know, if the government allows Hollywood actors to, you know, file copyrights over their images and, you know, then gives them the ability to sue every company who uses their image without their permission, you're going to find that the AI industry suffers in the United States, that is. But one thing I want to warn you about is that China and Russia are heavily invested in AI, as is Saudi Arabia. And those countries are not free countries. They're going to generate AI platforms that will have undoubtedly have seen all Hollywood movies. The problem, you know, Christopher Nolan has to be careful when he talks about AI. He has to be careful because if he puts the AI industry out of business in America, he's going to trigger a lot of job losses in America. And he's going to send them to India, Saudi Arabia, Russia, maybe, and China. And the UAE is getting in on AI. The Gulf oil states would have an easy time locating data centers, you know, in their region because they have a lot of oil. AI requires a tremendous amount of oil, and AI is going to be something that legal scholars and artists clash over in the future. I mean, my opinion about how AI affects Hollywood is that, you know, Hollywood should really just, you know, follow Elon Musk's approach of let people create images and songs using AI, and there should be no ability of companies to use copyright laws in order to shut down AI companies. I also don't think that AI companies should be able to copyright work that they use, the work that they create using AI. It's a legal headache. I'm not a lawyer. I just want to make that clear. So, um, but I mean, I understand the concerns that Hollywood people are talking about. So, I mean, on the issue of employment in Hollywood, there was an interesting article. I read a lot about what Christopher Nolan recently said, and the actors' strike and the government shutdown both are weighing heavily on decisions in Hollywood. The Directors Guild of America and the Actors Guild supposedly all need cash infusions. Yeah, so Hollywood isn't as rich as you think it is. When you look at, you know, Hollywood stars, you only see people like Tom Cruise and Ben Affleck. You know, those people have millions of dollars. Most people in Hollywood are C-level actors. You know, even most Academy Award winners, I doubt, are. very rich. And despite the fact that they live in Hollywood Hills homes, that they might not have like a lot of money, Hollywood is like a pyramid scheme wherein, as I say, people like Tom Cruise, Ben Affleck, Jennifer Lopez, and Taylor Swift, they're on the top of the pyramid, and the other people on the bottom all hold them up. And, AI is something that is destabilizing the pyramid and causing culture wars in Hollywood. If you Google the decline of Hollywood, you're going to find that one reason why Hollywood is declining is that they rely way too much on franchises. Hollywood is in the business of doing PG-13 comic book movies that are boring. No longer does Hollywood do rated R Terminator type movies that are innovative. They have rested on their laurels, for the past decade and con- produced IP harvested, slop in my opinion. Hollywood needs to do original movies. I'm going to give you a review of the latest movie I saw, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. And I'll talk about The Rip with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. Now, The Rip was an original movie. I loved The Rip. I thought it was a gritty action movie that made me think. Mission Impossible: Dead Final Reckoning. My impression of that was that it was overproduced. I would just describe it as a typical action movie that we've seen before. Mission Impossible: Dead Final Reckoning had a lot in common with Ghost Protocol, and so far this was like and I'm going to give away a lot of the movie. This is the second time in the franchise that Tom Cruise has saved the world from a nuclear attack. But in the Final Reckoning, you're going to notice that AI takes a prominent role in the form of the villain called the Entity. So yes, in the final, a malicious AI from triggering a nuclear apocalypse. I mean, I thought it was interesting how Cruise latched onto AI as being the villain, but I think that he was using AI as more of a scapegoat, as is Christopher Nolan. That's the fun. The more I think about it, is that, yeah, the villain of The Final Reckoning wasn't really a villain, it was a scapegoat for Hollywood's problems. And, The Final Reckoning is basically Hollywood complaint. It's a metaphor for Hollywood's complaints about AI, which, I find to be somewhat ridiculous. One reason why Hollywood studios might be folding is that there is competition from social media. Hollywood studios face competition from me. For every 10 minutes that somebody spends looking at my channel, they spend 10 minutes less looking at a Hollywood movie on streaming. People like, I'm not threatening Hollywood, but I think I can identify somebody who is Mr. Beast. Did you know that Mr. Beast's videos get more viewership than the Super Bowl? I actually think that Mr. Beast is crushing Hollywood. Natalie Portman said in an interview a few months ago that her kids are more impressed with, she said something to the effect of that her own children are more impressed with social media influencers than they are with celebrities. I mean, it's like when I was a kid, there wasn't any Mr. Beast. So the celebrities that I looked up to and admired were people like Tom Cruise and, Leonardo DiCaprio, Keanu Reeves. The celebrities that youngsters look up to in today's day and age are not necessarily all from Hollywood or music. They're not necessarily, like Taylor Swift or Sabrina Carpenter. A lot of the celebrities that modern, youngsters look up to are on YouTube. Yeah, they're people with big account followings like Mr. Beast, PewDiePie, Jacksepticeye, and there Nikki Swift. Yeah, there's lots of female ones out there that I just can't think of. Sorry for the ladies. I didn't mean to make it look like all of the big internet personalities were men. But yes, because Americans spend a lot of their time looking at social media, they end up spending less time looking at movies. And that is a factor that is causing the decline of Hollywood. In the 2000s, people, the Hollywood, elite complained about reality TV. The writers were furious that Survivor was replacing Seinfeld. What my message for Hollywood actors and writers in the unions is: why do you complain so much about competition? The complaints that a lot of Hollywood stars are making about their industry, in my opinion, seem to stem from their hatred of competition. It seems to me like a lot of Hollywood actors are actually somewhat delusional. They are furious that I don't go to the movie theaters every 2 weeks to see content. Hollywood stars, I understand why they don't want to compete against cheaply produced social media. I understand why Hollywood stars don't want to be like me and talk about their positions on every issue, in front of a YouTube audience space. If I were a Hollywood star and I were to give my positions about Donald Trump, Ukraine, the Middle East, I would face a huge backlash from both the right and the left, and inevitably my ticket sales would decline and I would get banned from working at Disney movies. Mark Ruffalo recently got himself into a lot of trouble because he dissed Donald Trump at the Golden Globes. Do I have a problem with what he said? No, but by the same token, I think that if a conservative actor wanted to get up at the Golden Globes and explain, why they supported Trump, then the Hollywood community, should have let them get away with it without getting fired also. I'm really curious as to if Mark Ruffalo was fired from Disney because he insulted Donald Trump. However, I think that if Ruffalo was fired from Disney because he insulted Trump at the awards, then there needs to be something in Hollywood contracts that protects actors against censorship. If you've looked at some of my videos, you're going to go back and look at the video I posted of Tom Cruise talking to Larry King about Scientology and gun violence in America. I have posted on my channel controversial quotes that Tom Cruise made that he would never make now. Tom Cruise was asked what he thought of Donald Trump's movie tariffs during the Mission Impossible press junket, and he dodged the question. Actors these days might find that they're losing popularity because they refuse to answer questions about controversial topics. They all want to be apolitical. Sydney Sweeney is promoting a new lingerie line, and she said that she doesn't want to get involved in politics. I think that actors walk a tightrope between getting involved in politics and not getting involved in politics. It's obvious that they all hate Trump, and I think that the reasons why they hate Trump are legitimate. And if you've seen my channels, I've been heavily critical of Trump for not supporting Ukraine and the tariffs. Obviously, I hate tariffs. I certainly don't approve of the drone ban. That really has me riled. But Hollywood stars don't talk about politics because they don't want to get canceled from the right or the left. They understand that half of their audience is liberal and the other half is conservative. So you're going to find that people, stars like Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Cruise, Matt Damon, Taylor Swift, do not talk about politics. Natalie Portman recently had something to say about politics, but I found it to be somewhat hypocritical. Yes, Natalie Portman lashed out at ICE. She called the behavior of ICE an obscenity. She expressed the fact that she hated Kristi Noem to some extent. Yeah, and she obviously doesn't like Kristi Noem or Donald Trump. I don't know if it's hatred, but yeah, she called the behavior of ICE, an obscenity. I admire her for speaking her opinion. I wish other actors and directors would say exactly what they think of Trump. Christopher Nolan, in his interview about how to save Hollywood, didn't talk about Trump's tariffs. I'm sure that he told the interviewer not to ask him about the tariffs or he would storm off the interview. But I would really, since Christopher Nolan films so many of his movies overseas, I would like to personally ask him about what he believes about 100% tariff. I mean, if Donald Trump put 100% tariff on the Odyssey, it would cost over like $40 per ticket, to see it. And there's no evidence that increasing the cost of the Odyssey is going to simultaneously increase the ticket sales of a movie, produced in America. But that being said, I do wish more movies were filmed in America. And my criticism of Tom Cruise and Natalie Portman goes as such. I mean, I don't want to dox people, but Tom Cruise has lived in England, for the past decade, and Natalie Portman spends most of her time in France. I mean, I find it interesting that Hollywood stars have totally abandoned the country that made them famous. All right, so thoughts on reading a psychology and philosophy textbooks set as fundamentals? Yeah, I mean, I guess you should read psychology and philosophy. I studied it, but no, my criticism of Portman and Cruise is that they moved overseas, and abandoned the country that made them rich. Now they might have done this for security reasons. A lot of Hollywood stars hate the paparazzi. In fact, I'll propose a solution to you about how to help Hollywood. Hollywood should ban paparazzi from taking pictures of people's kids. The place That's a new idea I have, and I think I'm going to represent this cause. I believe that the way, I came to this conclusion after looking at videos of Ben Affleck's kids on YouTube, which I don't think should be here. So yes, I want Hollywood to pass a ban on paparazzi in the public square. I believe that all photographs of celebrities' children should be banned. I do not think that Ben Affleck should be hounded by the paparazzi. If he's taking his kids out to get ice cream, that I think that Hollywood can coax stars to move back to Hollywood if they prevent invasive paparazzo from taking pictures of people's kids when they're going to Carvel. Um, and that's a controversial issue. I have a very liberal attitude when it comes to fair use. I believe that if a celebrity says something controversial, it's okay for people like me to react to it. I do not believe fair use includes the right to take pictures of the celebrities' kids. The children of celebrities are not public figures, and Hollywood should absolutely ban paparazzi from taking pictures of celebrities when they're out with their kids. I think that that's the reason why Tom Cruise and Natalie Portman left Hollywood. Natalie Portman is on the record as saying that she did not like Hollywood because of the invasive nature of the paparazzi. instead of giving so yes, Christopher Nolan thinks that we have to give the movie studios tax credits, in order to film in Hollywood. The skepticism I have of that is it's just a bailout. Instead, what I think Hollywood can do in order to ensure that projects are made in America is that they can ban paparazzi from taking pictures of people's kids in Hollywood. I think that what the paparazzi do is actually despicable. I mean, I would not like it if paparazzi were following me when I was going to the mall, and the pictures were being strewn all over X. I think it's actually illegal. I do believe that people have the right to go outside of their house in privacy. So yes, that's something Hollywood can do in order to bring the stars back to America. So Tom Cruise is rumored to be moving back to America. He's lived in London for the past decade, I think, in some $200 million penthouse called One Hyde Park. The address is all over the internet. I'm not doxing him, but he's moving out of London because he supposedly was freaked out by a an armed robbery of a Rolex shop by thugs on motorcycles. Yes, some thugs on motorcycles broke into a Rolex shop in London and stole a bunch of watches. And supposedly that is the reason why Tom Cruise is moving out of Hollywood. But I think that that's a silly reason to move because you have to expect, unfortunately, these days that that type of thing is going to happen. It's obvious that thieves aren't only interested in stealing from grocery stores. They're really interested in stealing Rolex watches. You can make, I guess, more money with a Rolly than you can with some shampoo if you're going to sell on eBay. But yeah, supposedly Tom Cruise moved out of his $200 million penthouse and now wants to come back to the United States because he was traumatized by the robbery on motorcycle of the Rolex shop. I mean, I understand why that would scare him. You know, um, Cities all over the world face problems with income inequality, but I don't think that income inequality problems justify stealing from a Rolex store and escaping on a motorcycle. I think that's actually terrifying, and I understand Cruise is concerned, but I hope that Tom Cruise can move back to Hollywood in order to help LA. So what's another reason why some stars might want to move out of Hollywood is excessive. California is a state that specializes in excessive taxation. Um, it's a lot cheaper for a Hollywood star to live in Florida than it is in California because of the tax scenario. California is proposing a wealth tax on billionaires in order to plug their deficits. I think that would be a disaster. Yeah, it would make it so that the billionaires would just all move to Texas. To tell you the truth, I mean, I would actually like to grow my social media accounts into like a big $1 billion empire. And I would like to move to Hollywood and try to set up a studio. I think that I might do that for my next, you know, project this year in Hollywood. I want to see how quickly I can use my social media prowess to purchase a $10 million mansion in the Hollywood Hills. I want to go to Hollywood and convince some billionaires to bankroll my own studio that generates original content and music. So, maybe Hollywood needs me. Um, Given that Netflix and Warner are getting together and forming a monopoly, it might be the case that Hollywood needs independently minded social media influencers like me to go over there and, just raise money from billionaires from scratch in order to start a studio. I'd love to be the next Harvey Weinstein. Get a job in Minnesota politics. Minnesota is like the last place I'd want to live. It's cold, it's landlocked. I don't like any teams from Minnesota. I don't like the Twins. The Vikings are okay, but I don't think I would do well in Minnesota. And I don't like the Bucks. No, not Minnesota. I think I'd have to go to maybe Michigan would be more fun. I think I'd want a state that's a little bit warmer. Suppose maybe I'd like to go to Las Vegas. Actually, Las Vegas. I looked at $10 million penthouses in Las Vegas and became obsessed with them. I think that if I were going to, yes, move to another state, it would be Las Vegas. But yes, I would love to use my YouTube channel to get me to move to Hollywood and use the Hollywood Mansion as a content generation platform. I'd like to, personally start a movie studio. I think that would be fun. But yes, Christopher Nolan and Trump have varying opinions on how to save Hollywood. Christopher Nolan wants tax credits. Donald Trump wants tariffs. It doesn't seem to me like Trump wants movie tariffs anymore. One problem with Trump's presidency is the Epstein files. The Epstein files are a nightmare for Donald Trump. Trump's poll numbers are going down. Trump lost an election seat in a Senate seat in Texas, I think, for the Texas Senate. So yes, Trump is in trouble. His tariffs are unpopular, and his drone ban is unpopular. I think Republicans need to develop a sense of libertarianism, and I think Democrats have got to stop clamoring up for bailouts, for their failed industries. Christopher Nolan states that California and New York must give Hollywood studios tax credits to film there. What Christopher Nolan, you know, doesn't answer for is why should taxpayers give movie studios credits in order to, film? Why can't movie studios make money filming, in New York and LA without tax credits? Streaming is big. Um, the box office numbers are predicted to do very well this year. With the Avengers, X-Men, Odyssey, um, and other movies that are coming out. It's supposed to be a record year for Hollywood. Um, I, I I would just like to know how much the tax credits that Christopher Nolan is clamoring for will cost the taxpayer. My question for Christopher Nolan is: are you asking, Walmart workers all to send $1 to Hollywood in order to plug budget holes within the Screen Actors Union and the Directors Guild? If that's the case, then I would be skeptical of the need to give Hollywood tax credits to film in California and New York. Um, I, I'm not really that familiar with the economy of California, but I think that California is becoming increasingly hostile towards billionaires and uh, unfriendly to business. That's what you would expect from a state that always votes blue. And I think uh, for the Directors Guild to demand a bailout is somewhat hypocritical. All right, so yes, Tom Cruise is moving back to the United States. Supposedly, I'm not sure if that's true. And as I say, I'm not going to highlight his address because I don't want to dox him. Doxing celebrities is risky, despite the fact that celebrity addresses are available. But yes, it says something about Hollywood that so many big stars don't live there. I don't think Julia Roberts lives in Hollywood. Nicole Kidman moved away from Hollywood. Uh, Cruz is out. Taylor Swift has a mansion that she spends some time in, but doesn't live in Hollywood. I believe the reason why celebrities are fleeing Hollywood is the taxation. I think that if California wants to keep their celebrities, they should, lower the taxation on billionaires, and they should fund the police. California is a state that exudes contempt for law enforcement, and as a result of that, a lot of celebrities have been seeing their witnessing their houses getting broken into by maniacs. I think that the LAPD needs to have a special unit that protects all of the Hollywood celebrities from people who, you know, break into their house. Oh yeah, that they don't give people permits. Yeah, yeah. I mean, in California, it doesn't surprise me that it's difficult to get a permit to build a house. California is a state that needs a lot of low income housing. I can't afford to live in California. Even if I sold all my assets and I mean, I mean, I certainly could not afford living in California. Even if I sold everything and got the equivalent job that I have now, it's very difficult to live in Los Angeles. I mean, I understand why California always votes for the wealth redistributing blue Democrats. I'm when the state is filled with a lot of people like me who struggle, and they see that there are a lot of billionaires, the idea creeps into everybody's head that the best solution is to tax the billionaires at a higher rate. But the problem with that is that the trickle down economics doesn't work if the billionaires leave. Um, Governor Gavin Newsom doesn't like the fact that there's a wealth tax on the ballot because a lot of California billionaires are already leaving California. But as I say, I would love to use my, you're welcome to Greenland. Well, Greenland better find a way to defend itself from Russia. Russia seems to be doing well in Ukraine. Greenland is a country that has 65,000 people. It's about to go independent, but it might not go independent for very long. Because I think Putin would love to invade Greenland in order to station military bases there and rig the elections in his favor. You know, I wish that Denmark could explain to the United States how it plans to defeat Russia if they invade Greenland. I think Trump is correct on Greenland. He should really just locate a lot more troops there and build a naval base. He should then say that we're taking the resources we need in order to build the batteries, the batteries and magnets that we need in order to build missiles that defend against Russian missiles. Yes, Greenland should be happy to supply America with the rare earth minerals that we need in order to fund the next phase of wars against Russia and China. Because if you look at combat footage from Ukraine on Twitter, you're going to see the most horrifying images you've ever seen. And Trump hasn't been a leader on Ukraine to the extent that Biden was. The political situation in America, in my opinion, is one of disgrace. I really don't like any parties that much. I would have no problem with endorsing a leader that I particularly did love, because it doesn't bother me if some people get angry. I really don't. The American political establishment, is divided between two competing camps of populists, and I think that the culture wars that the populists from both sides fight against are manifested in the movie culture. So yes, that's the purpose of this broadcast. I'm trying to explain how the Trumpians would handle the decline of Hollywood, and how the liberal elite like Christopher Nolan would address the decline of Hollywood. And when you see that Trump wants tariffs and Christopher Nolan wants government tax credits, you get diverging views on how to fix the underlying problems of Hollywood. But I do think Hollywood is in a state of decline. One reason why people don't want to visit Hollywood is that it's a mecca of homeless people. I don't want to diss the homeless people. I don't diss homeless people. I respect people who are homeless and struggling on the streets, but it seems to me that there are lots of encampments in LA. I think LA is a mecca of crime. I mean, in Los Angeles, in California, you could steal $1,000 a day from grocery stores, and they can't even jail you because of the contempt that Democrats wage have for police in California. It's ridiculous. I mean, there's no reason why people who steal $900 from a store should not be put in jail. That's another complaint I have about California is that they don't believe in putting thugs in jail. You know, I don't think that jail rehabilitates people, but the purpose of sending someone who steals from a grocery store to jail isn't to rehabilitate them; it's to punish them. And I think that if California were to jail more of their own criminal element, they would find that the stores have less theft and that people would get paid more. Am I a Democrat? I think I'm more like an independent. I wouldn't particularly say I'm a Democrat or a Republican these days. I believe that there are America is an extremely divided society, and it's not necessary to call yourself a Democrat or a Republican these days. Um, one president we had said that the two-party system would collapse, and he was right. I'm not sure who he was. He stated, yeah, and I think what you're seeing now is that the two-party system in America is collapsing, and people in Hollywood are afraid to talk about what types of policies they want because they don't want moviegoers to boycott their films once they learn their political identity. And that truth is manifested in the behavior of Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise always used to talk about Scientology. He is a passionate Scientologist that believes that psychiatric care doesn't work. He always used to talk about his opposition to psychiatry, but he doesn't do that because of the cancel culture that gets generated on the internet. Tom Cruise is the most influential artist of our generation. Believe me, I am not saying that I disrespect his work, but I think his views about Scientology uh, are ridiculous because he clearly thinks that Scientology is a replacement for psychiatry, which is not true. Yeah, I support human rights, and I don't think Christian nationalism is healthy. I don't believe that it's wise for Christians to declare their religion the only one that's allowed in America and ban all the other ones. In no sense do I identify as a Christian nationalist. Yeah, I mean, I'm a Roman Catholic, so I'll declare my religious identity off of the bat. But that being said, even as a Catholic, I admire the ideas of people like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens. I think skepticism is also important, and we shouldn't rely on the Bible to be our science textbook. And I certainly am not going to call myself a Christian nationalist and expel other religions from the country. America is a huge country, and we can fit, a multitude of faiths. I think we should have a separation of church and state. Yeah. So yeah, what you're seeing in Hollywood now is that the culture wars are playing out in the regulatory framework regarding AI and tariffs, in the movies. Christopher Nolan wants tax credits. He's trying to devise a means of regulating AI, but he's learning that there's no simple fix to there's no simple way to regulate AI. AI is like a monster that morphs every day. And there's no legal framework that copyright lawyers can justify in order to stop the rise of AI. just because if what the warning I would give Christopher Nolan is that if you use your clout in Hollywood to destroy American AI companies such as Grok, OpenAI, Sora, and Gemini, you will make it so that Americans get their AI from unfree countries like China, Saudi Arabia, India, and the, and when Americans get their AI from other countries, you're going to learn that there's severe consequences. So I'm just going to give the advice to Christopher Nolan. If you're watching this telecast, do not impose undue regulations on the American AI industry. It seems to me like the AI industry is the only boom town in America. I don't believe that Hollywood should blame the decline of Hollywood on AI. I think that Hollywood should blame the decline of Hollywood on franchise over reliance. What's one thing we've seen over the past 20 years in Hollywood? We've seen that Hollywood studios are heavily reliant on comic book movies and Star Wars movies. They're all following in the Walt Disney path of harvesting intellectual property for profits. They don't generate original content anymore. It seems like all Hollywood is interested in investing in is IP contracts from comic book movies like Marvel Comics and DC. I don't have a problem with all comic book movies, but I think that it is definitely true that there are way too many comic book movies. Hollywood has got to stop doing remakes of movies like Starsky and Hutch, Mission Impossible, Batman, Daredevil, all Marvel videos. They've got to stop recycling old IP and create new content. Why can't Hollywood create a new superhero? Why are all superheroes harvested from yesteryear's comic books? I guess it's difficult. What's one problem with movies is that they're predictable because a movie can only end in so many different ways. You can only have so many different plot twists. And I'm going to reiterate that one big problem that I had with the Mission, Impossible movie is that it was another movie wherein the main character prevents a nuclear bomb from going off. We've seen that trope so many times. Even in The Dark Knight Rises, there was a nuclear bomb in the city, and the main character had to take the nuclear bomb out in order to save the city. And we obviously saw that in Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. The main character, clearly defused the nuclear Armageddon before it happened. And that plot point was found in Ghost Protocol, in the Dubai Mission Impossible. In that Mission Impossible, Cruise deactivated a nuclear warhead before it hit San Francisco by a fraction of a second. So, yes, moviegoers are sick and tired of PG-13 action movies that contain, boring fight sequences, car chases, and helicopter stunts. There was nothing particularly innovative about the action scenes in Final Reckoning. They were all just special effects driven. Now, I think Tom Cruise is on to this point. His latest movie is called Digger, and Digger is coming out. That's his next movie. It's an all-original movie by visionary director Alexander Aronatu. I'm going to see that and review it. I want to see how I enjoy modern, original content from Hollywood. Yes, and I'm going to reiterate again that I am sick of the remakes and, my message for Christopher Nolan is that you do not have to ask for tax credits in order to encourage Hollywood studios to do even more remakes that get filmed in New York and California. Try, what Christopher Nolan needs to tell his Hollywood friends is that, you have to do original content. You have to stop relying on reboots and remakes. Steven Spielberg has an interesting movie coming out called, Disclosure Day. I remember the title. That's an original movie. I'm going to go see Disclosure Day and, talk about it. It's about aliens. Don't look at the trailer. Just go see Disclosure Day because I think that even the trailers, even movie trailers these days, give away far too much, information about the movie. Yes, so Steven, and I'm gonna, yeah, so what I'll do now is promote an original movie that Hollywood is making, yeah, by Steven Spielberg. Obviously, Steven Spielberg is the king of Hollywood. It's called Disclosure Day. It's about aliens. And obviously, the plot point of Disclosure Day is that the government will be forced to disclose everything they know about aliens. And so I'll be very interested in learning about what Steven Spielberg thinks that the government can disclose about aliens to us. I'm sure that the plot is going to be that they've been living amongst us all along. So that'll be an interesting Hollywood movie to go see if you like, original content. And so the Avengers is back also next season with RDJ helming the role of Doctor Doom. And if you want to make money off of the Avengers, I recommend buying their Marvel Chrome boxes and reselling them on eBay. Yes, you could, from Tops.com, you can purchase boxes of the Avengers and flip them on eBay for a quick, $200. You have to enter like all the drawings. So, all right. So, what's another Hollywood movie that I would like to talk about that surprised me? Oh, Formula One. I was very shocked that the movie Formula One received a nomination for Best Picture. Hollywood is now becoming interested in the Formula One spectacle. I could guarantee you that MotoGP is going to get a movie made about it. I look forward to seeing that. But, again, Formula One is another movie that Donald Trump would, not approve of with his tariffs because it was filmed overseas, obviously, with the help of American actors. Actually, Formula One did take place in America. They showed some pretty cool endurance racing at Daytona. But yes, Formula One is up for Best Picture. I hope it wins. I think it probably won't win, but I definitely believe that it should. But that again is not a film that Trump would be happy over because most of it was filmed overseas. I'm not sure that a tariff on movies would stimulate production growth in America at all. I think the movie Hollywood studios produce so much content overseas that it would doom them. It would hurt Hollywood, even more if there were a tariff on movies. And that lesson applies to auto tariffs as well. I heard recently that like GM had to spend $1 billion extra because of tariffs. Trump's tariffs are just a tax on, working class Americans, and they definitely should all be done away with for good. But yeah, I mean, we do have a problem with income inequality in America, and the income inequality debate was manifested through the labor union strike back, I think, in 2003. But if you look at the results of the Hollywood, actors strike, you're going to see that it hurt Hollywood. Uh, you know, it, Strikes are just mutual assured destruction for everyone involved, and I certainly understand that there's a lot of frustration on the part of, directors in Hollywood like Christopher Nolan concerning the SAG-AFTRA and writers strike because that hurt them also. And it actually hurt Hollywood. That is one reason why, there's a lot of ironically, one reason why a lot of jobs have disappeared from Hollywood is because of the SAG strike. It was a huge mistake, in my opinion, for the labor union to have like a year-long strike in Hollywood because it just destroyed so many people's careers. It, uh, yeah, I agree that both parties suck. Yeah, people don't like, the Democrats and they don't like Republicans these days. As I've said, I think the two-party system is collapsing in America. It's not possible to use the word Democrat or Republican to describe anyone anymore. I think you have to take an inventory of their views across multiple issues to determine where they stand, politically. But that's to be expected. So, what are my plans for, movie going? I'm going to see The Rip again. I thought The Rip with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon was phenomenal. Okay, so let's talk about Netflix and Alex Hanold. I'm sure. Did a lot of you guys see the Netflix special with Alex Hanold? Netflix recently thought it was acceptable to live stream a video of Alex Hanold climbing up a huge skyscraper in Taipei, Taiwan. This skyscraper climb was controversial. There's talk on TV. There's talk around the blogosphere that the commentators actually did a terrible job about narrating Alex Hanold's ascent up the skyscraper in Taiwan. The commentators are saying that the broadcast team had no chemistry and that there were many gaffes made by the people who commented about Alex Hanold scaling the building on live stream. Alex Hanold's family seemed to get upset when the commentators asked if he had like some type of death wish. But I mean, you have to ask that about a man who climbs up buildings with no ropes, obviously. And I wish the commentators would have done more to dissuade average people like me from doing stunts that could kill them, such as Alex Hanold. Um, you know, I wonder how the movie studios looked at Netflix's decision to live stream Hanold climbing up a building. People have been killed, climbing a building without ropes. Doing that, free soloing has killed people. Does Netflix? There does seem to be a problem on social media wherein people do stunts for clickbait and end up getting killed doing those stunts. Unfortunately, it happens a lot with motorcycle tube. Sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of YouTubers generate content with their motorcycle, but given the fact that motorcycling is an extremely dangerous activity, they end up getting, killed on their motorcycle, as what recently happened, I think, with someone named Jixer Broth. I think they got like crippled because a motorcycle hit them while they were in the parking lot. It sounded like a terrible story. But yes, I think that one question I have for Netflix is how do you respond to criticism that you're promoting a social media habit that causes people to put their lives in danger when you live stream a video of Alex Hanold climbing up a 200-story building with no ropes. I mean, I watched the special. I think people who climb without ropes are crazy, and I do think that it is accurate about them to say that they have a death wish. Um, but yeah, the talk on the internet was that the narration of Alex Henhold scaling the Netflix building was some of the worst narrating they ever saw on a live stream broadcast. So I don't think that the people who commented, publicly during the live stream about Alex Hanold, are going to get jobs in the sportscasting industry. I mean, I'm not sure any self-respecting sportscaster who comments for like the Yankees or the Bills would have attended Hanold's building climbing stunt. Alex Hanold described free soloing as a sport. He stated that climbing up a building or a mountain without ropes is a sport. I don't think it's a sport. I think it's a publicity stunt. I think it's extremely dangerous, and it ends lives needlessly. I mean, you should not do stunts on social media that risk your life. Um, there have been plenty people who have died at the Grand Canyon trying to take selfies near the edge of a cliff. Some people fall off of buildings when they sit too close to the edge. I don't consider that to be a sport. I think it's a stunt. There is no internationally recognized sport of climbing up buildings and mountains without a rope. That was pure stuntsmanship on the part of Alex Hanold, and I think that movie studios will have to look at Netflix's decision to live stream that, if to determine if they really believe that Netflix should be able to acquire Warner Brothers. Um, so that's another interesting controversy, in Hollywood. Okay, audience, thank you for watching this telecast. I got to go to bed now. It's 4 o'clock. Thank you very much.